Thank you, Chairman Cannon. I'd like to introduce Joe Benedict, Assistant Chief of Wildlife Division.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited to be here this morning and introduce two guest speakers that will be speaking to you momentarily. Both work for Ducks Unlimited, one here in the States, one north of the border in Canada. And I think it's quite fitting that we're here in Memphis at the Bass Pro when we have their presentations, as Ducks Unlimited has the Waterfowl Hunting Heritage Museum here. And so if you haven't had a chance, it's on the second floor to go look through there. There's some really neat waterfowling history there. So anytime we talk about waterfowl, we think about the wonder of migration. So these birds migrate from far north down to areas like Tennessee and points further south. And anytime we think about that, we realize that waterfowl are managed at a continental basis. And so as a foundation of that management, back in the early 80s, the U.S. and Canada, and then later on Mexico, created the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, which again is a foundation of waterfowl management, has been for several decades. When we think about the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, we next think about the North American Wetland Conservation Act, which is the funding mechanism to fund the habitat management for the Waterfowl Management Plan. And so the NAWCA, the funding mechanism, requires a non-federal match to obtain those funds. And so today's speakers are going to mention the importance of Tennessee state dollars in this NAWCA match process, where we're able to use federal dollars and state dollars, and in this case, partner money from Ducks Unlimited, to manage waterfowl at a continental level, which of course benefits Tennessee's hunters, bird watchers, and other wetland enthusiasts. So the first speaker today is Tim Willis. He's in the bottom right of this picture. Tim is the manager of conservation programs for Ducks Unlimited in the Southern Regional Office in Mississippi. And he's going to talk about Tennessee's partnership with Ducks Unlimited within the state to create and enhance wetlands for migratory birds, whether they're game or non-game. Dave Kosterski is from Canada. He works for the state's grants program out of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and he's here to talk about Tennessee's partnership with Ducks Unlimited through this NAWCA grant process to fund wetlands north of the border, where we know the majority of our waterfowl breed and are raised. And so as Tim comes up, I wanted to commend the commissioners and the director as well for their recent trip to Canada. They wanted to go firsthand and see where the funds that Tennessee uses to match with Ducks Unlimited and NAWCA, they wanted to see the project sites. And so they did this at their own cost. They did this on their own time, their vacation time away from their family. So I want to commend the commissioners and the director for the interest in doing that, and again, as good stewards of Tennessee's waterfowl in our funding overall. So without further ado, I'll introduce Tim Willis, and then he'll be followed by Dave Kosterski.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Chairman, commissioners, thank you all for the opportunity to be here today and to speak on behalf of Ducks Unlimited, to talk about some of the project work that we've done in the state and look at some of the upcoming work that we're going to be doing. As Joe said, I manage our conservation programs for the Mississippi Alluvial Valley, which includes the states of Arkansas, Mississippi, North Louisiana, Alabama, and then of course Tennessee. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to talk about, again, some of the project work that we've done, some upcoming work, and if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those. So this slide, basically, I just wanted to show DU's conservation investment in the state of Tennessee. And this looks at all acres that DU, in conjunction with our partners, with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, the Fish and Wildlife Service, private landowners and foundations. Collectively, we've enhanced over 45,000 acres in Tennessee, and we have protected over 4,100 acres, and those protected acres are in our conservation easement program. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that program, conservation easement basically is a tool that allows landowners that have property that they've managed for wildlife, that they want to protect it in perpetuity so that it can never be divided or developed. And so they come to organizations such as DU or other land trusts that can hold these easements, and we're in charge of monitoring them every year forever, and to ensure that the landowner's wishes are intact for that property. And in return, the landowners often can have a tax benefit for that. So to deliver these projects and programs, we have spent close to $10 million here in Tennessee. And again, this is on public and private land with all of our partners. And this slide shows just the work that Ducks Unlimited and TWRA have done together in the state on TWRA management areas. And so collectively, we have enhanced over 6,000 acres on state properties. I put the Tennessee Partners Program in there. Some of the commissioners may be familiar with that. That program started back in the late 90s and ran through last year. That was basically TWRA, Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Ag, and DU. And so for many years, we worked with private landowners to install pipes, water control structures, and have cost share for dirt work so that they could hold winter water on their ag lands for waterfowl. And so that's been a very successful program, and TWRA was very instrumental in the long-term success of that program. Ducks Unlimited, we have spent about $2.4 million in Tennessee just on TWRA lands, and TWRA has partnered with us and contributed $1.4 million to help with that conservation work. And as Joe mentioned, NAWCA is one of the funding mechanisms that we use. The North American Wetland Conservation Act. That's a federal grant program that requires match, and TWRA gives us the match, as do other partners that we leverage and go on and get more dollars. So it's a great partnership. And again, this is numbers and acres just on the state WMAs. And you can see there, the yellow dots indicate the different areas that we have worked on. I believe there's 17 different WMAs throughout the state. The majority of the work has been west of the Tennessee River, and that's just, that's sort of the waterfowl country for this part of the world. We do have projects in Middle and East Tennessee, and so, and I've got some projects here I want to show you in just a minute that are coming up in East Tennessee that's pretty neat. So we've worked pretty much throughout the whole state. And so currently, we have 3 projects that we're working with TWRA on. One is just up the road at Eagle Lake Refuge. That's 142 acres. We're improving some moist soil, waterfowl impoundments there. Tully WMA is another one. That's a pretty big project. That's up in Lauderdale County. It's going to be over 400 acres. Again, these are WMAs that we're improving so that the managers can more efficiently operate and manage and provide better hunting opportunity for the public. And then the one in East Tennessee, Chickamauga WMA. This is a smaller project, 27 acres, but it is important for the waterfowl that use that part of the state. So we're excited to be working in that area. And I mentioned NAWCA. Eagle Lake and Tully are both funded through NAWCA. We came to TWRA and worked with Tim Churchill and others to get some match from you all. And we were able to take that and leverage it and secure over $900,000 from the federal government or Fish and Wildlife Service through NAWCA. And that's what's funding the work that's going on at Tully and Eagle Lake. And the Chickamauga project, that's actually being funded by a foundation. There's a foundation out of Chattanooga called the Tucker Foundation, and they're interested in supporting wildlife work in the eastern part of the state. And so when we found out about that foundation, I contacted Joe and worked with him and some of the other staff in East Tennessee and came up with this project. We submitted the proposal, and Tucker funded us at $40,000. And so that's going to pay for some water control structures and dirt work. And so we're thinking this could be something we could come back to fairly routinely to them to get funding for that part of the state. And I mentioned Tully. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what some of these projects look like, and that may be a little small, but basically what we're doing there, Tully is a large area, obviously, and the water level there varies significantly to what you would want to hunt to where it's over your head. And so what we're doing is building 9 individual units within that area and resloping the dirt and the land so that it's that 12 to 18 inches, which is optimal for waterfowl foraging, and it makes it a lot easier on the area managers to rotate between moist soil management and flooded ag management to produce better habitat and better opportunity for the hunters. So that's all I have. Again, I would just like to end by saying, again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, the commissioners, Joe, Mr. Carter, for all the guys that are everything that y'all do and the partnership that we have. Y'all are probably one of the great partners that we're privileged to work with, and look forward to doing more in the future. Any questions? No? I guess Dave Kostarsky from DU Canada will come talk about our state grants program.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, Chairman, for the invite and the opportunity and the time to address this commission, the people of Tennessee, and thank you, Director Carter, for also the time and the partnership. Ducks Unlimited Canada, along with Ducks Unlimited, the two organizations really work as a continental organization. But continental conservation can't be done just by Ducks Unlimited. It's a partnership that requires all of us up and down the flyways, whether we're talking within the Mississippi Flyway, Central Flyway, or any of the 4 flyways. It's important to work together collectively because these birds don't know boundaries. They don't know, the border between Kentucky and another state, or Tennessee and another state, or Canada and the U.S. As an organization, we've worked since 1938, 37 in the U.S., and in the U.S. we're reaching 80 years as a conservation organization. In Canada, we're at 1 year behind that. Something that relates to that, that's over half the time that Canada's been a country. Canada's celebrating their 150 years as a country this year, and Ducks Unlimited's been in existence and working and sending money from the U.S. to Canada for over half of that time period we've been a country, which is an amazing thing. This morning I want to talk about this partnership where the state here in Tennessee, along with 37 other states, send money up into Canada, and it's quite a challenging and sometimes often misunderstood program because you're taking hard-earned dollars out of the state and you're sending them somewhere else, not just to a neighboring state but to another country, and that takes a lot of gumption. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of passion. These dollars make a big difference, and frankly what they're doing is they're servicing your breeding grounds. The breeding grounds happen to be in another country, but frankly migratory birds need to breed in other places. Not like a lot of species, your upland birds that stay in the state, or your deer. These are species that leave your state, and so we have to find ways to work collectively to work in those areas where they make a difference for the birds that then come back to your state for either hunting or bird watching or whatever other folks like to do when it comes to waterfowl. I think a good way to start is I have a video that we created in partnership with Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency that includes a couple of folks you should recognize. I'm going to play that video now. I think it gives a really good background and starting point for this program, and following that I'll continue my presentation. I don't know if I need to hit play or nope. There you go.
It's all about the ducks. The relationship between the southern U.S., mid-continent U.S., and even the northern U.S. is that many of their ducks come from Canada.
We don't want the duck population to crash while we're the bosses.
It's an investment into what we're doing in state, and if we don't have that investment, we get no return.
The last drought, mid to late 80s, really formalized the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. It was that event that said we need to do something different continentally. State agencies saw this need, that the Canadian breeding grounds in particular were in risk of loss and risk of not being able to recover from this drought.
The waterfowl populations were going down, down and down and down. And if you let those populations get to a certain level, it's going to be almost impossible to get them recovering back to the days that I remember when I was a little kid. And I don't want ducks to go down the tubes on my watch. And there were a bunch of guys just like me in those high-level positions that didn't want to see ducks go out of the picture on their watch. And so we all wanted to do whatever we needed to do.
It's really formalized around the early 1990s and the beginning of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, when the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies said, we need to make this a formal process that we can raise dollars to match a new form of legislation called the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. The state grant program became this commitment by state agencies to provide matching dollars for this larger federal program coming out of the U.S.
And why would a state want to send money to Canada? It's hard-earned money, and yet there were crazy people who thought it could be done, it should be done, we have to do it, and we couldn't think of a better idea. So we ran with it.
It took many individuals, many governments, state, provincial, federal Canada, federal US, it took all these players to come on board and say, we need this to happen. This was a monumental task and is really recognized worldwide as one of the most successful conservation efforts in the world.
It was very hard, but it was worth it. I think the duck population would have continued to decline if we had not done this. And I think if we don't continue to do it, I think you'll still have problems that affect habitat across the continent. And so I think we've got to stay on top of doing what we're doing.
This program is about continental conservation of waterfowl. It's about our continent.
When we invest $1 and it gets to be $4, and before long that is matched somewhere else even greater, it's an investment into what we're doing in state. And if we don't have that investment, we get no return. If we had that same rate on any other investment we made, everybody would be on board, and so we want to continue that as long as we can.
Tennessee can't do it by themselves, and another state can't do it by themselves, and I don't think DU can do it by themselves. But collectively, we see what we can do, as illustrated with the millions of acres that we've impacted. You get an airplane and you fly to Canada now and you look down on the ground from 20,000 feet and you can almost pick out the waterfowl habitats that have been developed, stair-stepping all the way up to Canada.
It's extremely important that we do our part in making sure that those lands are preserved and there are adequate places for birds to nest and to make that migration so that we eventually see them here in Tennessee.
The state grant program is that first dollar that's made the magic of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan success in North America. That state dollar is the first one that gets leveraged more than once, more than twice, many times. It's that state dollar that really started the success of the North American Plan, putting money up into the breeding grounds in Canada. It's urgent today to make sure that we continue on this path, even during the wet times, because the next dry cycle will be around the corner.
This is really the only thing that we've done across the continent in North America to make a huge difference in habitat, in an ecosystem, I think. I just don't see anything else.
I thought that video captured Gary's passion very well. He's considered one of the fathers of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. He's one of the fathers of conservation here on this continent, really. He was a very instrumental individual at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and he really drove the formalization of this program, not just the North American Plan, but the state funding program to the breeding grounds. This has been a formal program since 1991. However, state agencies started sending funding through DU to Canada over 50 years ago. But in 91, they formalized it. They called it the State Grant Program. We're looking for a new name because that confuses a lot of people when you talk state grants, because there's other state grants. But this program has continued to grow. This is the chart over the last number of years. As you can see, it grew. In 91, when they formalized the program, it took a big jump. And they've had 2 task forces since then, and after each task force, they've seen another bump. After each task force, they decide what they're going to do is divvy up the goal. And so this goal for state agency funding has been set at $10 million, and that was set back in 91, has been reaffirmed by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies each time over the 2 task force periods, that is still a need. And it's really based on the conservation need, not necessarily what we're able to contribute today, but what the conservation need is and continues to be going forward. As you can see, collectively, state agencies have been almost at 3.5 million. A little dip last year. The only reason for that is one of our tremendous partners, the state of Illinois, is having some challenges legislatively between the governor and their legislature, and can't find a way to appropriate funds. And those things happen. There are going to be challenges at the state level over time, and these partnerships last much beyond that. So that $10 million goal stands, and it stands as being confirmed and supported by the association. This is currently the map, the funding map of how all the states participate. And I'm happy to say what we've seen over the last number of years and continue to see is increasing number of states. We saw that dip with Illinois, but we're actually anticipating over 40 states this coming year. New Mexico is going to be participating in the program for the first time ever this coming year. We also have been talking with Colorado and Wyoming about re-entering the program, Utah as well. And so we're going to have a number of states, and our goal here is still to have all the states except for the 2 that are kind of challenged to justify sending money up to the breeding grounds in Canada, and that would be Alaska and Hawaii. They really don't get a whole lot from Prairie Canada. Although we do have partnerships with Alaska because British Columbia is the wintering grounds for Alaskan birds. And so the partnership kind of flows the other direction right there. But this is it. It's a tremendous partnership, and as you can see, Tennessee is a critical part. The yellow states are those increasing. One of the things I'd like to point out is it looks like by the end of this year, we'll have 25% of the states at or near their AFWA goal, reaching towards that $10 million. That's a big step for this program, to have a quarter of the states near that AFWA goal, and more continuing to aspire to get to that goal. That's enough about money. What I really want to talk about is what we do with that funding. And really, there's a couple of statements that I'd like to point out. One is science alone does not ensure that conservation, science does not ensure good conservation, but science must be adapted and applied in strong conservation actions to be effective. So taking the dollars, using science, and DU being a science-based organization, is about taking that science and the dollars and turning it into real conservation. And as an agency of wildlife responsible for wildlife resources, I'm sure you're very familiar and are committed to the same effort. Let's take that science and apply it so that not only are we doing conservation how we think it should be done, but we're doing it how we best know it should be done. Ducks Unlimited is committed to the use of science and its implementation of the goals of the Prairie Habitat Joint Venture and other joint ventures to ensure the resource investment of all partners results in the greatest conservation gain for waterfowl. Well, one of the bases of science is band return information, and this is just raw band return data. Basically, take all the band returns that have occurred. This is since 1986, the beginning of the North American Plan, and it demonstrates that there's a clear connection between Prairie Canada, even Ontario, and the birds that are harvested here in Tennessee. Over 20% come from Saskatchewan in particular, and the partnership with Tennessee, remembering that we have partnerships with 37 going on 40 states, we focus the funding from an individual state to the place that they get their most ducks from. So we have states funding Ontario, we have states funding Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, all across. Every province in Canada has some states supporting their conservation work. So Tennessee's resources that you commit to this program are directed towards Saskatchewan because that's where you get your most waterfowl from. What we do with that, it's actually pretty simple. We need to protect what we still got, and we need to restore what we've lost, both wetlands and grasslands. For those folks that aren't overly familiar with what waterfowl do on the breeding grounds in Canada, not only do they need the wetlands, but they need the grasslands to nest in. About half of the species are upland nesting: mallards, pintails, blue-winged teal, gadwall. All those species nest on the ground in the grass. So not only do you need to have the wetlands there to protect and have that safe place where they get the invertebrates for egg production, for the hens, or just a safe place to be, but they need to have that area to nest. And we've lost a lot, but thankfully we still have quite a bit to save. So a lot of our focus, some of the largest investment of your dollars and the matching dollars is in protecting what we have left. Thank goodness we still have some really great areas to protect. And this is what we did this past year with Tennessee funding. This past year, Tennessee put forward $80,000. So what we said before is we match that. So that gets matched by Ducks Unlimited. And then we use that to apply for NACA funding. Okay, so the math adds up to more than that. How come? Well, right now we have a very favorable exchange. Your dollar is much stronger than ours. And in many ways, that is a good thing for Canada. And I'll tell you, it's a good thing for waterfowl conservation in Canada because that 80,000 doubled to 160 to 320 actually turns into over 400,000 Canadian. And that allows us to do more conservation work on the breeding grounds in Canada. As you can see, the largest bulk of it is in habitat retention, which is primarily conservation easements and land purchase. And then the rest of it's within wetland restoration and upland restoration, so grasslands. Wetland restoration, this is one of the biggest challenges we're going to have going forward, is restoring those wetlands that we lose. Asking a landowner who's maybe drained a wetland before, or a previous landowner that's drained a wetland, to put a wetland back is almost like asking them to put a dent in their car. It's a tough thing for them to do, but we find ways to partner with these folks. A lot of the work that we're seeing is in a program we call revolving land purchase, where we actually buy the land, we do the restoration work, and then we sell the land with a conservation easement. It's a tremendous tool. We get the perpetual protection with the conservation easement, protected forever, but while it's in our control, we get to do that restoration work, and it's a tremendous program that allows us to do that. This is just a few sample projects. We do everything from, this one is a conservation easement protecting the areas outlined in yellow. This one is a purchase that we plan to keep. We bought it. The areas in red are wetlands that we're restoring. The yellow are protected, and all the grassland areas are restored. And this is a forage program. We work a lot with agriculture. In Prairie, Canada, over 90% of the land base is privately owned. There isn't a whole lot of public land in Prairie, Canada. So we have to work with agriculture. They are our partner on the ground. Cattle industry is number one. Without cows, there's no demand for grass. So supporting things like a forage program or pasture or grazing programs are absolutely critical. Farmers are our number one partner on the ground just because we need them to see the value of conservation in the landscape. This is last year in Saskatchewan. All the little triangles on there are individual segments of projects that we did in Saskatchewan over 1 year. We're busy. We spent in last year in Saskatchewan over $13 million doing conservation work in that province, and we secured a whole bunch of habitat, and we've been doing this for a long time. It is our number one area in Canada that we do conservation delivery. Those outlined kind of polygons, those are what we call our priority areas. Those are the areas with the highest waterfowl density, therefore the highest opportunity for return on investment for our waterfowl conservation work. There was brief mention by Joe about a trip that occurred this fall. The commission, we invite every state that partners with us, and I call it your tour of duty. It is your duty to see where your dollars are going, what your dollars are being spent on, and to ask those challenging questions about is this conservation investment worth it? We take great pride and pleasure in hosting state agencies. Last year we hosted Arkansas, we hosted Nebraska, Tennessee. I hosted Oregon up in British Columbia. So we had a number of states that made trips up to Canada to see what their conservation work was doing and their resources were accomplishing. Tennessee, I was so excited when I heard that we had a large contingent. It's a tremendous sign of interest in your conservation dollar investment to get that kind of a contingent to come to Canada on their own dime to get this, to get the first-hand look at this. And we covered some ground. We were based out of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, although some people took a detour through Regina, and we've been teasing Tim about that for a long time. But we spent most of our time in Yorkton, which is where I'm based out of. My office in eastern Saskatchewan. It's an awesome area for waterfowl. I mean, I'm blessed to be there. Every direction I leave, I can be outside of Yorkton by 5 minutes and be in some amazing waterfowl habitat. It's a tremendous area. And the person on the right of that image is Trevor Plews. He's one of our heads of conservation in Saskatchewan. And he helped tour our Tennessee folks around the Yorkton area to show what the work is doing. One of the other things we also like to do is we like to recognize our partners in Canada. And back when Commissioner Cox and Commissioner Symington and former Deputy Director Fox made a trip up to Canada, we did a dedication and to recognize Tennessee's investments. This was done over in the Allen Hills, which is a area south of Saskatoon, one of our highest waterfowl priority areas as well. And it's our way of saying thank you, dedicating a project to an agency. And that was done. So this time, on a cold fall day, we stopped and froze, walking through the snow up to the top of this hill to get a picture beside that plaque and show the previous commissioners that that's still there. We don't remove them. We don't take them away after we do the dedication. They're there forever. And that partnership holds strong, and we're very proud of it. We believe that the state agencies, as was said in the video, that first dollar that the state commits to is really a magical thing because it makes a difference continentally for DU and for all of us when I talk about waterfowl conservation. I wrap it up with saying that thank you. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for the long time of investment in conservation on the breeding grounds for your ducks that come back here to Tennessee and are here right now. Your funding provides that significant contribution to the goals of the Prairie Habitat Joint Venture. A lot of work remains. One of the things we don't often talk about, we like to talk about all the successes, but frankly, there's a ton of work to be done. We're losing wetlands every day. One of our greatest challenges is we still don't have good wetland protection legislation in Saskatchewan. We're losing wetlands every day. Canada estimates, DU Canada estimates we're losing 80 acres of wetlands somewhere in Canada every day. Now that's bulked up in the spring and the fall primarily, but we are losing wetlands constantly, and our work is not anywhere close to being done. In order to sustain the populations we have today and into the future, we have to continue to do this and work collectively to keep it happening. But with your help, we can get to the goals of the North American Plan and the goals of our partnership. That's all I have. Open to absolutely any questions you might have for me, either here from the commission or anybody.
Any questions, comments from the commission?
I think the record needs to reflect that Dave's real name is D.U. Dave, as he was noted on the trip. Just a handful of comments, quick comments. It's important to emphasize that there was not one nickel of either licensed dollars nor state dollars used by this commission to make this trip. We did it because it was the right thing to do, and while somebody could have come up with a justification to use some of our agency's budget towards this, we all agreed we're not going to go there. We're not going to go there. And by golly, we're glad we went up there. We learned a lot. And we learned a lot of things that we believe can be applied to Tennessee. Simply because the migratory birds, whatever your interests are, whether it's watching them or if you happen to be a hunter of them, they don't come to Tennessee unless this program is successful, period. That's the facts of life. I wish we could come up with migratory moose, but we can't right now. So this is it, the third part, and this is something that's not known by much of the Tennessee public, unfortunately. NAWCA would not have occurred without Gary Myers, period. Politics were at hand in Washington, and Gary himself is the one dealing with the president that made this thing successful. That's huge. It's also a huge compliment to our state to have Ducks Unlimited's headquarters right here in Memphis. So Tennessee's influence on NAWCA and waterfowl is very prominent. Sometimes not as known as it should be, but very prominent, and I think that has allowed our state to be remarkably successful in, I'll say, the waterfowl industry, whether it is hunting, whether it's watching, or whatever you do. So we do thank you. It was truly educational, and you did top us at times on the hospitality part. So thank you, Dave.
Dave, we appreciate the good video and the trip up there and everything.